and the supervisors. That's just the basic. And note, coverage doesn't consider vacation, training, sick time, special functions like Pride Day and things like that, times when we need extra polls, you know, things like that. Court time, extra investigations, things like that. There are times when just the two doesn't cut it. We have to, you know, use more, but, you know, we work that out. So when we take out full-time guys, we also lose other shifts too. If you take all the officers that get earned time, that work shifts, basically, if you take all the hours that, you add all the hours that they have off from sick, vacation, whatever, you have 1,272 hours equals 159 shifts or 32 weeks of lack of, that you got to make up with other people. 5 shifts, 32 weeks, it's 159 missing police shifts. Now, training needs, if I give each guy just 5 days of training, that's going to equal 45 shifts that I got to make up. So now add the 32 weeks of shifts and 45. So on average, and it doesn't work this way every year, but on average, other than what the guys work, because guys, you know, a full-time guy does take a vacation, he does go to training, and he does get sick. So that means that even though we have those guys, we still have to make up about 204 other shifts. That's 204 times that, hey, I'm not available for that shift. So that's where you're bringing in the supervisors and the part-time people to cover the holes in the schedule. I already told you about what the on-call guys do, so we'll kind of skip that.
Did you mention that these guys, they don't get paid extra for doing these things at home? That's part of their package, correct?
Yes and no. The supervisors, if they're on home and they're on call, I don't pay them any extra to be on call. If they jump in the car and they go out for 3 hours, then they get paid for that. Mark O'Brien won't because he's salary, but Chris will, you know, Chris Lamb, because he's hourly. So, but what happens is, you know, it's a commitment they make. Like, so if Mark takes 3 days and Chris takes 4 or vice versa, you know, those 3 nights, that's a commitment. He's going to be home, he's going to be on the phone, he's going to answer questions, and he's going to go out if he needs to. If Chris goes out, you know, I'll give him that time. For the most part, a lot of the times they will be able to answer it on the phone, but sometimes they on the phone just don't work when you're off at a house, you know. But it is part of their gig. It's like with the stripes comes responsibility, you know. So this, I could probably do this. This is a little hard. This might be hard to see, but I'll point out a couple of numbers for you. What this is 24 years of the history of Wakefield PD, with what we had for manpower and what we had for calls. And I'll just kind of give you a matrix. If you go up to top, well, 1989, there was 7 full-time offices, 2,500 part-time hours, and 560 overtime hours, which were budgeted. So what you had was, at that time, in '87, you had a chief, a lieutenant, a sergeant, 4 patrol officers, 8 part-time officers, and at that time we had a prosecuting attorney who did our court work. So fast forward, and then you go to next year, because we were fairly consistent. 1989, 8 full-time officers. The part-time hours went down a little bit. The overtime hours went up. Chief, lieutenant, 2 sergeants, 3 part-time, 8 part-time, prosecuting attorney. Fast forward that 23 years, and you have 10 full-time officers, 2912 part-time hours, and so we've shifted the matrix. We had 16 guns out there 22 years ago. We have 16 guns now, but 2 of them now are full-time. So, but what really has changed in 25 years basically is the calls for service back then were like 2,000 calls, 2,100 calls. And the calls for service now are like 15,000. So what used to be able to do, what the town that you grew up in was Mayberry, that you went down, you talked to Andy and Bonnie, they weren't all that busy, they had time to talk to you. You know, they had a couple of calls today, you know, so they were doing, you know, back in those days, they were doing 5 and 6 calls a day. So they could really look into stuff. We're doing 40-something calls a day. So a lot of times things just get overlooked. You can't, you know, deal with it. So, so what you have is each patrol shift on average, if you have 40 calls a day, each officer is doing about 8 calls for service a day. So what's a call for service? It means that it could be anything from simple as a car unlock to a home invasion. Each one is a separate call. But whatever it is, they're processing out, they're getting called on the radio or by phone or whatever and say going to 8 calls for service a day, and then they have the responsibility to write that up, document that, and have that done mostly by the time they leave. So it cuts down on the available hours to do the random patrol and kind of do the Andy and Bonnie stuff. The number one, I don't know what your group is number one, the number one complaint we get in the PD is we don't see enough patrol officers out, we don't see enough cars out, and we want more traffic enforcement. You know, people are going too fast on our road. That's still the number one stuff that we hear. We don't see enough cops and people are going too fast. So what that's telling us is that we got to get out of the station more, get on the road more. So that's what we're trying to do. We talked to you about the crime trends. This is still the same stuff we talked about. How many cops do most departments have? Is another question I'm asked a lot. And there's a lot of ways to figure it, but the best people who track that's the FBI, because everybody reports population and offices to them, so they'll give you the numbers. So national average of cops per 1,000 people is 3.5. Northeast region is 2.8. New England is 2.9. So most studies that you see, if you were to hire a company to do a study, they'll say you need 2.9 officers per 1,000. In 2008, when I did the presentation, I used 2.4 because New Hampshire was slightly lower than New England as a general. So, but 2.4 is about the average of what you get cops per 1,000. Now, full-time employees, because it's not just cops who work. Sometimes you have full-time employees like Earlene. The average is, you go down, New England, the average is 3.7. So, like, if you had a department like Rochester, you'd have X amount of offices, three guys doing the evidence, 8 guys doing dispatch, and you would add all that number up, and you get a different number than just cops. Obviously, I'll tell you what we have, which was Rita's question. We do Wakefield and Brookfield, as everybody knows. We do, population is 2,790 is the last census. If you do 2.4 officers per 1,000, it's saying, if you went by the FBI standards, it says that we need roughly 14 full-time officers, or 13.89. We haven't figured out how to slice that guy in the 8-9 yet. That's not what we have, but we're okay, and I'll get to what we have. If you do it, which most law enforcement studies will do it, they'll say a town your size doing 2 towns in the geographic area. If you went with the 2.9, which is ours, then you'd need 16.79 officers, and again, you have that problem slicing that guy in half. but basically 17 full-time offices. We don't have that either, but that's just the full-time residents. You guys know here that we're a lot more than just full-time residents. We have the big summer influx, we have the fall influx, we have this, not this year, snowmobiling and skiing. So we have really 3 seasons where our population goes well above just the full-time people. But our numbers are based on just the full-time people. But we have, you know, we have campgrounds, we have lakes, we have Route 16 corridor, with the 109 corridor. It's, you know, there's a lot of things that increase. We have part-time residents that live, if you added up all the part-time residents and said, well, Joe lives here, you know, 6 months of the year, and Pete lives, if you added that all up, our active population is a lot higher than our basic full-time population. So if we were going to look at this, you know, as to what our actual needs are, you could say, you could probably safely say, why don't we use a number of 7,000? Because at any given time, we probably have another 1,000 more than just who live here full-time. And especially in the summer, because summertime, we're probably going well over 10,000. We're going to 10 to 15,000. But anyways, we use, you know, we'll just stick with what, you know, the full, but that's part-time residents, seasonal increases, recreational increases, you know, and so I just did a couple numbers here. If you use the 7,000 at 2.4 offices, and then you're getting up to, you know, most people would say we need about 17 offices. And again, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm not asking for more offices.
We have 17 altogether.
We do and we don't. We actually have, and this is a full-time matrix, we actually have 10 full-time, and we have 7 part-time shifts. So we have 17, I could have 2 part-time guys, or I could have 20 part-time guys, but I only have 7 shifts a week. So if you take 7 shifts, we really have 11 and a half offices. Because if you take the 7 shifts, that's like a guy and a half. So, you know, actually, I like the part-time guys. They work well for us. They're all full-time certified guys. But it actually would be easier if we got rid of all the part-time guys and just had 2 other full-time guys, so we just had 12. Then people would say, oh, you only have 12 people. Well, actually, we'd have more manpower, but, you know, then, but we have 16 now, but we really only have the equivalent of 11 and a half offices. So the other things that we have to consider in Wakefield, which we have 3,900 housing units. 3,900 housing units. That's a little bit old. After Tom built a few more, we'll be crowding 4,000. But you figure, you know, roughly, you know, when we settle in here, there's about 4,000 houses to watch in town. So you got to get around a little bit and take a peek. You know, and Brookfield's a lot less, but you add the 2 together. You know, we're at, you know, if you add, this number's a little old, but if you add what we really have, we have about 43, you know, both towns, we have about 43 residences to look after. Some of those residents are empty. That's when they're vulnerable. We want to try to keep an eye on those. That doesn't include all the houses up in the, you know, the campgrounds and the trailers and all that stuff, which is another demand at a different time of the year. But, so, whether the people are here or not, or whether they're overly flooded, we still have to try to keep a look at. So with all those houses, you know, 50 of those are going to get broken into. So percentage-wise, you're still safe in your home, but I would like next year to come back and tell you that we dropped that 50 to 25. We'll never get it to 0. It's not going to happen. It would be nice to say, we dropped that thing to 25, and we sent 12 of them off to prison. But that'd be good. That'd be worth a lollipop. Some other factors to, we talked about the seasonal exposure. The other thing that happens too is that, you know, you add the 2 towns together, we've got to do 68 square miles out there. So when you, that's one of the reasons why you need 2 guys out there a lot, because if one guy's off with a car, and he's getting his head handed to him, you want your backup there in a fairly reasonable amount of time. And when you spread out Wakefield and Brookfield, there's a lot of square miles. And some of the areas that we have, it's not the fastest to get there. So, you know, having two guys in town is not very, you know, it's good, but you gotta at least have the two that we talk about. We talked about the dwellings, the campgrounds, the snowbirds. The Route 16 corridor does need a lot of attention because a lot of people in Wakefield, as you guys know, it's a bedroom community. So they're out of here, the cars, you know, on the fly in the morning, it's on the fly at night, and then you mix that with the tourists and stuff. It does get dangerous out there. We got to put a lot of attention to it. Staffing, again, staffing through the years. In '89, we had 8 full-time officers, 8 part-time officers, still 16 guns, and an animal control. So that was 17. 2012, we have 10 full-time officers, 6 part-time, and an animal control, same number of guns. Same number of sworn officers in 24 years. Not too much changing. So the need is going like this, and we're trying to keep the costs down going like this. And I think we do that in a lot of ways. The computer systems are better, that helps us. The equipment's good, the facility's good, and I think we're more, I think we've gotten to the point where we've gotten as efficient as we're going to get. At some point you can get efficient all you want, but you know. But I think we've made progress with that, and we've, you know, I'm trying to keep costs down. I'm trying to keep everything fairly level, but still give you guys the service you need. So that's, you know, that's where we've gone over the years. For those who didn't think we had cops years ago, this was 1967, and if you look, there was 12 of them there. So,
are you in it?
So anybody here that was in that picture?
Fred might be.
Was you in there, Fred?
There was Frank. Frank.
Yeah. So, you know, again, like, you know, when people told you, oh, hey, when I grew up, we only had Timmy and Charlie. Well, actually, that never actually was true. Those were the guys you saw at the station, but the patrolmen were out on the road. So, you know, the thing is, we've always had a pretty good charge of cops because it's a big area. But, so the things to consider in staffing, 24 hours, 7 days a week model. We did it by the calls for service, and we did it by the population model. You know, the 3 ways you'd consider staffing. So the question is, do we have adequate officers in these categories? I think we do right now, but I'll tell you it's busy. Do we have adequate clerical staff? Like, in other words, you know, would people want to see someone there on Saturday so they could get their reports, their accident reports, report a crime, things like that? Would you want somebody, you know, do we have adequate paralegal hours? So those are the things that we'll consider. And when, like I told you 3 years ago, in 5 years I'll come to you again and tell you about the needs, but in a couple more years I'm going to look at that again and I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe we need a little bit more in the clerical, maybe we need, you know, but not right now. Right now we're doing okay. I'd like to see the economy get better. I'd like to see us we all would like to see this election get done. And I just don't think it's time, even though it's busy, to try to think about addressing, you know, changing manpower. And so we're good right now. But it is busy. So when you call sometimes, you're not going to get sometimes the same service that you did when you grew up 25 years ago when they were only doing 8 and 10 calls. You're going to get, we'll get to you, we'll try to give you a good answer, but we can't give you the attention that you used to get when you know, and if you want that type of attention, that means another, you know, X amount of offices. Probably.
There's a technology out there where if nobody's at the station but somebody has problems and gets to the station, can you do like a webcam thing where you're hitting a button outside the vestibule and you're communicating with the officer in the cruiser through a webcam, or is the technology there where you can pick up the phone in an emergency situation at home, and the phone rings in the cruiser. You know, not necessarily a cell phone, but the technology that diverts it from the station to the cruiser, and the guy picks up the phone.
No, actually, there isn't that technology. There is some technology where the dispatch center can talk directly to the guy in the cruiser, but you also, the guys who are funneling through the 8 calls a shift anyways are not going to be sitting waiting for a call in the cruiser anyways. So the best thing, you know, this is a rural area, so the best technology that we have, just use dispatch, and whoever's the most free is going to go to your call. The other option is this, is a lot of PDs do this, and I particularly don't think we need it, but we could take downtown and we could put, if we would only hire 6 people, we could put our own dispatch in there, like Wolfboro does, Moultonboro does, and stuff like that. We wouldn't go to the Carroll County. So what you would get, you'd get better personal service. You'd have your report, you know, you'd have a better interface with the person at the window, but you're talking hiring 6 people. And I don't think, it would solve a lot of things, because they could enter a lot of calls for the offices, they could do a lot of the paperwork for the offices, they would always be there, they could put you kind of, set people down, separate them out, get them in the interview room, get statements going, they could do a lot of things. And it's nice. You know, it's nice if we were the Wolfboro model, which the difference between us and Wolfboro is we have more calls than they have, literally. They have more money than we have. So they have a dispatch center, which their dispatch center works for the fire, ambulance, and police. So it's not wasteful. It does do a good job. We could do that too. But I don't really think we need that. I think between the weekday stuff that you come in, interface with the secretary, nighttime, you may have the supervisor, you might have to wait, the supervisor will get back to you. But in order to run a dispatch, the least amount of people you can run it with is 4.5 people, but that's without vacation time. In reality, to run a dispatch center with just one person on at all times, it really takes 6 people. So if you take the one that we have that's already full-time, we'd only actually have to add 5 people. But who wants to add 5 people when we have it already with the county?
Do we pay for the service through the county?
No, not at this point. There's always rumbling as to whether if this particular person gets in, or it's always rumbling that at some point they were going to try to make the towns pay for the service. Moultonboro, they lobby hard because they have their own. They lobby hard to have the county charge the departments who use it, but you know, it's a county. It's on your county taxes. They have a dispatch center, and they don't charge us for it. So what happens is the call goes up to there. If it's nighttime, whatever, it actually go to 911 first. It'll go through the Ossipee dispatch center, and then they'll send the call to the officer who's on duty through the radio. So you do get a little disconnect from the building here to the dispatch center, but for the money it saves, it's, you know, we're not to that point, you know, so.
The mutual aid funds that we spend and send to, is it the county taxes that collect the mutual aid? How does that work? And is that just fire department or ambulance?
Well, mutual aid is basically an agreement between towns that if you need help, I give you help without cost, and if I need help, you give me help without cost. Now, police-wise, we do mutual aid too. Like, for example, say we have right now, you get the head-on Route 16. Well, 2 officers is not going to cut it. And we'll even get the supervisor, that'll be 3. But that's still not going to cut it, because if they're all out on the scene, then nobody's doing those other 8 calls that they're getting. So we'll call Milton and say, hey, you send one up for traffic, and we'll call Ossipee, can you send one down for traffic? So we don't get a bill for that. But when Milton needs an officer because they got a fight going on at Pineland Park, then we scoot down there and we fix it for them. You know, and but that's how it works. It's just I'm loaning you a guy, you're loaning me a guy. It's supposed to be mutual. And we do mutual aid we have agreements with Milton, Middleton, York County Sheriff's Department, Ossipee, Wolfboro, a couple other towns in Carroll County. And, you know, and that also works on highway projects too, like, say Aspen Tree comes in and they want to do work here and we don't have an officer. And we'll call them up and say, do you have an officer that can come up and do that thing for us? And then vice versa, we'll go down and do some for them. But it's a no-cost exchange, so.
Other than
We
the
pay.
annual payment. that-
Well, there is no payment for mutual aid, not for cops. I think what you're thinking a little bit about is the Carroll County mutual aid with the fire, and that's a different coalition. But for police mutual aid, if Donnie Groves has a big Donnybrook going up there and he needs 2 cops up there, you know, we'll scoot up if we can, and vice versa. When we have one, they'll scoot down and nobody charges anybody. And they have authority to go up there because we have the mutual aid. We can actually make an arrest as if we were an OSSB officer because we have that agreement in place, you know, so.
See right up top there on that slide, you have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage. I know it's not exactly your department, but the second floor of the building, I guess that's always been designed to have the ambulance coverage the same. Maybe you
Yeah.
could speak about that second floor, because that might come up this year.
Fire model is a little different than police model. It depends which model you want to use for manpower, but what the fire department is looking to do is to put a day room upstairs in the second floor. If we did the expansion upstairs, there'd be several things that we'd do. We'd put the evidence upstairs, that would help the PD, training room upstairs, that helps us with our physical standards, because the guys have to meet physical standards every year. And mostly the upstairs would be for the fire department. So there would be a day room, which if you're on duty as a fireman and you're on duty like 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever, you have a place to go to just kind of veg for a little while in between calls, or clean up and take a shower, things like that. So in a lot of fire models, the day room is part of the manpower model. Todd, I don't want to speak for Todd, but Todd has a plan, but he really wants to have the upstairs done to, at some point what you're going to need is, we have 12 hours a day covered by the ambulance and fire now. So if you're going to have a heart attack, please have it before 6 at night. After 6 at night, then there's people on call, which is good as long as time is not an issue. So at some point, we're going to go that other 6 hours. And that's 6 hours, that other 12 hours. And that's 12 hours times 7 days a week, which means that he's going to change his hourly model. And so now he's going to utilize a day room. So again, I don't want to speak for Todd, but I know that's part of the expansion. So probably 2/3 of the upstairs is dedicated towards future fire needs, and about 1/3 of it is dedicated to expand some of the cramped stuff that we have downstairs for the PD. But and that's in the. If you guys have been following the master plan that's in the master plan, and that'll be a topic that'll be coming up in the next couple of years. But I'm in favor of it as long as the economy is okay. And I think it's a good investment into our town to take steps. We did this building, it's been 12 years now, because we moved, it's been 2000. So we've been there 12 years. The original plan was to do the second floor in 5 years. And it didn't hurt anything not having it, but we had a plan. But now we're kind of at the 15-year model. So you moved in there, and then 15 years later you expand. So that'll be a topic that'll be coming up. So keep your eye on that. And depending on what the bond rates are and the economy and stuff like that, it may be a good idea to get that done. So,
When I see the police cruisers